Have you ever made a promise in the heat of desperation? A promise you thought would win God's favor, only to later realize you spoke too quickly, too rashly, too recklessly. That's where we find Jephthah. Jephthah was not the kind of man anyone expected to lead Israel. He was the son of a prostitute, rejected by his own brothers, cast out from his father's house. Life had marked him with shame. But God, in his mysterious way, raised Jephthah to be a mighty warrior. When the Ammonites threatened Israel, the elders, those same people who once despised him, came running to him for help. Isn't it funny how the rejected stone often becomes the cornerstone? So Jephthah stood on the battlefield, the weight of his people on his shoulders. And in that desperate moment, before the clash of swords and the cries of war, he lifted his voice to heaven and made a vow. If you, O Lord, deliver the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph, I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering. He spoke those words like a man bargaining with God, as if victory needed payment in advance. He thought he was showing faith, but in truth, he was revealing fear. And God gave him the victory. The Ammonites fell. Israel triumphed. Jephthah returned home not as an outcast, but as a hero. But then, tragedy walked out the front door. Not a servant, not an animal, not a thing he could live without. It was his daughter, his only child. She came out dancing, tambourines in her hands, joy spilling from her like sunlight after a storm. She was ready to celebrate her father's victory. She had no idea her very life was the price of it. Can you imagine the moment? Jephthah's knees buckled, his face broke, he tore his clothes in agony and cried out, "Oh, my daughter, you have brought me down, for I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break." But she, his daughter, she didn't weep. She didn't curse. She looked her father in the eye, and with a strength that could only come from God, she said, "My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised, now that the Lord has granted you victory. But grant me this one thing. Give me 2 months to wander the hills with my friends and weep for my life, for I will never marry." And so she went. 2 months in the hills, not to rage against her fate, not to blame God, but to mourn the life she would never live, the wedding dress she'd never wear, the children she'd never hold. She cried for dreams that would never breathe. And then, true to his vow, Jephthah did what he had promised. The Bible doesn't give us the details. It leaves the silence hanging. But the weight is clear. A vow made in haste cost a daughter her life, and a father his joy. From that day forward, Israel's young women remembered her. Year after year, they went out into the hills for 4 days to honor the nameless daughter of Jephthah, the girl whose story became a warning. Be careful with your words. Be careful with your promises. Be careful when you think God needs a bargain from you, because sometimes the vows we make in fear can cost us the very thing we love most.